Hello girls, gays, and non-binary babes. Welcome back to my channel. It has been a minute since I posted. I am trying to get my shit back together. Life has been crazy at the moment, but here I am. Hopefully we're back to once a week recurring videos. Hopefully. But anyway, today we're going to be talking about all of the books that I read in February. It's a bit of a late wrap-up, but it is a wrap-up nonetheless. I read 12 books during the month of February, and I'm really excited to talk about them. A lot of them are arcs, and so you'll hear about some upcoming books that you might want to check out. So yeah, I will not ramble any further, and we will just get on with the video. The first book that I read in February was Death in Her Hands by Ottessa Moshfegh. So this is the third, I think this was the third book of Ottessa Moshfegh's I have read. I read My Year of Rest and Relaxation first, and then Eileen, and now Death in Her Hands. And I've read a couple more since then, but I won't give that away. This is about an old woman who is living alone, completely isolated, and she finds a note in the woods that basically says, this person is dead, I didn't do it, and she takes it upon herself to solve the mystery of who this person is that died and also who did it. So yeah. I really liked the idea of loneliness in this book and what humans are willing to do when they're just completely alone and have nobody to talk to. And I think it was like sad but interesting at the same time, and a lot of Ottessa Moshfegh's books are like that, so I really like that aspect. I think overall I was just expecting it to be a bit more weird, kind of like how Eileen and My Year of Rest and Relaxation were. The next book I read was an arc that I had, but I read a library copy of it because it is already out, and that is All of Us Villains by Christine Lynn Herman and Amanda Foody. So this is a YA fantasy, and if you've been watching my channel recently, you know I am not really into YA fantasy as of late. However, this was so good. I read this just to kind of check it off of my NetGalley list and get my percentage up and kind of read my backlisted books from there, and I was not expecting to like this so much. I gave this 4.5 stars. I really had a good time reading it. I think I read it in like 2 days or something, and it was like 400 and some pages, so that's pretty impressive. But yeah, this is about a group of kids who are all children of kind of the elites in their town, their city, and every generation, one child from each of these elite families is chosen to kind of fight to the death. And it's like the Hunger Games, but with rich, powerful people and their families instead of, you know, like poor people. So a little bit different. But it also has magic and all of that good stuff because it is a fantasy, and I just really liked the action of this one. I think it was obviously really similar to the Hunger Games, but it stood on its own, and it didn't like make you compare everything to the Hunger Games, if that makes sense. It just felt like it was using that theme or that plot to make its own point, and I really liked that. So yeah, if you're looking at reading this, I definitely recommend it. It was just really good, and I probably will actually read the second book because I enjoyed it that much. So yeah, I think that's saying something. Next up, we have a physical book, finally, and I read Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell. This originated on Reddit, on the r/nosleep subreddit, and this was originally like a short story, but it was turned into a full-length novel. This one I gave 4 stars. Again, really liked it. I thought it was super creepy. However, I think the main characters were a little flat. I think that's why I couldn't rate it the full 5 stars. It's just something about the main characters, and something just felt flat in it. But overall, I really liked the story. This is about a guy and his fiance who are staying in his fiance's cabin, like his fiance's parents' cabin, and there's weird things going on outside, and eventually his fiance is talking in her sleep, and he realizes that she is talking to these things in her sleep, and it's really creepy. And if you know somebody that talks in their sleep, or you talk in your sleep, then definitely give it a read, or don't, because it's really creepy. And it was just it was just a lot of fun. So yeah, 4 stars for this one. Next was another arc, and that is All the Horses in Iceland. This is by Sarah Tolmie. This one, I gave this 2 stars. I did not like it. I really can't tell you anything that it's about. It follows Nordic folklore around horses. That's pretty much like all I can give you. It was a novella. I read it fairly quickly, but I just didn't like it. The writing was really beautiful, but it just kind of went in one ear out the other kind of thing. Well, in one eye out the other. Like, I did not comprehend anything, and I couldn't tell you what it's about. So I don't really have much to say on this one. Maybe if you're into Nordic folklore and stuff, you might like it and might understand it more, but it just was kind of a flop for me. Sorry. But what was not a flop was the next book I read, and it was a reread, and that was The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. This was a 5-star read when I read the arc. It's a 5-star read again when I read the finished copy. It was just as incredible as the first time, maybe even more so, because having read it the first time, I think the ending kind of like was a lot to wrap my head around, but reading it the second time I was like, okay, all right, like giving a little refresh, it made a lot more sense, and I freaking loved it. I loved it. This is a gothic story about a woman named Jane. Well, her name is not Jane Lawrence in the beginning, but anyway, she decides to get into a marriage of convenience with this doctor. He's got a dark secret. There's a gothic manor. This whole story is just very gothic and dark, and has a lot of like seance kind of magic and kind of sci-fi a little bit at the end, and it's trippy and weird and kind of makes your head spin a little bit, but I loved it, and it was incredible. And I freaking love this book, which is kind of an unpopular opinion, I noticed. I feel like people tend to give this 3 stars, but I freaking loved it, so I don't know what else to tell you. Next, we have another arc, and it is another Ottessa Moshfegh book. I got my hands on Levona by Ottessa Moshfegh, which is her next book coming out. I can't remember when this comes out, but it does come out this year. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. So it ended up being my least favorite Ottessa Moshfegh book after Death in Her Hands, but I recently read another one, and that is one of my least favorites. So it's like it keeps going down, but I'm determined to keep trying with Ottessa Moshfegh because I just love her writing style. But anyway, Levona follows a town. It follows a boy in this town who his dad doesn't really like him. He's like super abusive. His mom died. He was told his mom died giving birth to him. I think overall I really liked the commentary on power and class and that kind of thing. It does deal with this boy killing the king's son, and the king takes him as his son instead. So he goes from being this poor, you know, nothing kid to being the son of the king, basically. A lot of it was just a little too weird for me and just wasn't my favorite, but I still really liked it. Like I said, 3.5 stars is not a bad rating, so yeah. The next book that I read was I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. This was gifted to me by Savvy from Savvy Reads Books, and listen, Savvy comes through almost every time, like honestly. I had never planned on reading this book. I had originally thought it was a story about, like, it was a young adult book about, like, mental health and things like that. And I mean, you could kind of argue that it is, but overall this is a really incredible horror book, and I think it definitely deserves its praise. So if you haven't heard of this or the movie, yeah, it is a movie on Netflix. It follows a girl and her boyfriend, and she is traveling with him to meet his parents. And it's so weird. Like, you think it's going one way and it just completely goes off in another direction, and but it still makes sense. Like, it's still, the foreshadowing was still there, so it wasn't just like completely out of nowhere. But this was just so good. My favorite part wasn't even like the twist ending, it was the vibes of like the first half, which was like snowy winter night, kind of eerie darkness with mildly weird things happening, enough to make you say, like, in your head, like, what's going on, but also not like really question anything. Especially because, like, I feel like meeting your boyfriend's parents is such a daunting thing that, like, your mind just completely focuses on that and you kind of just exclude everything else out of the picture, which it was just such a good setting and such a good plot line for this book. Oh, it was just amazing. So if you haven't read it yet or watched the movie, I'd highly recommend it because it's not what you're expecting, I promise. This one I did give 5 stars, and I really, really liked it. And next up we have another arc, and that is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. Y'all, when the publisher reached out to me to send me an arc of this, I died. This was one of my most anticipated books of the year, and I could not wait to get to my grimy little paws on it. This is a retelling of the Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. And if you know me, you know I love T. Kingfisher, and I loved this book. I loved it. It was a novella. It was like 100 pages. I gave it 5 stars. It was amazing. Amazing. If you don't know what the Fall of the House of Usher is, I don't know either. I've never read it, but I know it's Edgar Allan Poe and it's gothic and dark and horror-esque. So of course I was excited. But I don't know what the original story is. But this story is about this soldier who is going to visit an old friend, and the old friend is dying, and the house is like falling apart, and there's weird things happening in the forests nearby with mushrooms and rabbits doing weird shit, and it was just so good. If you like gothic stories, pick this one up. If you like weird mushroom stories, pick this one up. Put it on your TBRs because it's fantastic. Next up, we have another book that Savvy sent me. Thank you, Savvy. And that is Little Secrets by Jennifer Hillier. This is a thriller in the realm of like Gone Girl, just like women doing bad shit. And I love that. This was not my favorite. This is the only book that Savvy has sent me that I have not loved. But I did give it 3.5 stars, which is still a really good rating. So this is about a woman who, her son is kidnapped when he's like 5. And it follows her mostly like a year later, and she discovers that her husband is having an affair, and it's kind of like her whole life is going down the drain. She used to have this perfect, wonderful life, and now it's just like everything's gone. And she takes it upon herself to get rid of the mistress, and it kind of like follows that idea. I really liked it. Overall, I think it was really good. I read it in like a day and couldn't really put it down, so I commend it for that. But overall, even though I'm just not a huge fan of like blaming everything on the mistress. Which, like, I know it makes sense in the context of this book, but it still felt a little off. So, 3.5 stars. But I still really liked it. So, yeah. Overall, I don't have much to say on this. So, yeah, we're gonna move on. I do have a lot to say about the next book, though. So, bear with me. Next, I read My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. 5 stars. 5 stars. This was incredible. I freaking love this, and I actually made my best friend buy it when we went to Barnes & Noble the other day because it was just so good and incredible. I really like Grady Hendrix. I like his book, The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I've read, what's the other one? The rock band one, We Sold Our Souls, and then I also read Horror Store in February, which we'll get to in a minute. This one, I think, definitely my favorite of his books. Loved it. Incredible. This is set in the 80s, and it feels very, very campy. It feels like an 80s horror movie, kind of cheesy, but also slashery and fun. And just 80s vibes everywhere. I mean, like, the freaking book is meant to look like a VHS tape. It was incredible. And normally, with like a cheesy plot line like exorcism, I would be nervous. And I was nervous going into this because I thought it might be cheesy. But it was cheesy in all the right ways. It was cheesy in all the ways that 80s movies are, 80s horror movies. And that's the reason we love them. So I loved this. It was incredible. And I mean, the friendship part of it, that was also a big part of why I loved it. Just the dynamic between the main characters and the evolution of their friendship. And it was really sad, but just interesting at the same time. So yeah, definitely my favorite Grady Hendrix book. Pick it up if you have not already. I freaking loved it. Yeah, cannot rave about this enough. So next up, I read Nettle and Bone. This is also by T. Kingfisher. This was also an ARC. So I just love T. Kingfisher, honestly. This book I gave 4 stars, but this was really good and I really liked it. The beginning was really hard to get into. Like, I kind of had to force myself to push through it, but once you did, it was so fun. And the plot doesn't really seem like it would be fun, but the characters you meet along the way it's like a traveling book, and I feel like you can't go wrong with that. This is about a girl who, her sister is married off to the prince, and the prince ends up being super abusive, and her sister is like constantly pregnant to like make sure she doesn't get killed or like abused badly. And her sister, the main character, takes it upon herself to go and kill the prince, but she needs a little bit of help. So she meets some fun characters along the way, and yeah, we'll leave it at that. This was just really fun. If you like fantasy, highly suggest it. If you don't like fantasy, maybe give it a try. It's not like super high fantasy. It's a standalone, it's easy peasy, it's fun. So maybe give it a try. I haven't been in a fantasy mood lately, but I still really liked it, so I think that says something. The next book I actually still have with me, but it is across my room, so I'm not gonna go get it. But like I mentioned earlier, it is Horror Store by Grady Hendrix. This is about a haunted IKEA, and you could not ask for more. I mean, not exactly a haunted IKEA, but it's in a world where the US has made its own off-brand IKEA, and that's where it takes place. And I really love the immersion of this book. Like, it looks like a... Let me grab the book for you, because I feel like that would make more sense in the context of this particular review. So this is what the book looks like. It looks like an IKEA catalog, and when I say immersion, this is what I mean. Every chapter starts with like a furniture item, and it has to do with like the actual chapter, so it makes sense in the context of the book, but then as you get towards the end, it's like really weird fucked up shit. So yeah, this is a haunted IKEA, and it was just so fun but so creepy at the same time, and I freaking loved it. I gave it 5 stars. Still not quite as high a 5 stars as my best friend's Exorcism, but still 5 stars. This was amazing, and I could not recommend it enough. I mean, look at the author page. Like, come on, that's hilarious. I love when authors really get into their books like this. So yeah, like I said, haunted IKEA. The main character in here kind of like hates her job. It's kind of like a nowadays situation where it's like, I don't care about this job, like I will leave at a moment's notice kind of thing. But she hates her job, but she's asked by her manager to stay overnight one day with him and another woman to investigate somebody who has been sleeping there overnight or breaking in or whatever. So weird things start happening, and it just gets so freaking weird, and it turns into like a Saw-esque story where like these furniture items are like used as like torture devices, and it's so cool and so creative, and I loved it. So yeah, 5 stars, absolutely incredible. Love Grady Hendrix, love him. And finally, we are ending this video on another flop, and that is My Annihilation by Fuminori Nakamura. This is translated from Japanese, and I saw it in my library and kind of just picked it up on a whim. This is about, it's kind of hard to say. It's a book that is told in like letters and stuff, and it's about the idea that it's like the power of suggestion and what that can do, and that aspect was super cool. I really liked it, but I did give this 2.5 stars because like none of this made sense to me. It was really hard to follow, and my biggest issue was every single character had an opposite had like another character with a name that started with the same letter. So if there was a character that had a name that started with N, there was another character that had a name that started with N, and it was so hard to follow who was who, and which characters were which, and that part messed me up the most. It was so hard to follow, but I really liked the whole power of suggestion thing, so I was like, it's kind of a toss-up. So I did give this 2.5 stars. Yeah, just do with that information what you will. I think somebody with a few more brain cells than me might be able to understand a little bit better. So yeah, so that is going to do it for my February wrap-up. Thank you so much for watching. If you read any of the same books, let me know, or if you have ever read any of these books, feel free to share your thoughts or whatever. Just say hi if you want to. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.